Star Wars fans. Hey, there are 326 days until Christmas 2021. And tonight we've got some guests. We've been trying to get this panel together to go through Light of the Jedi. Now, tonight, just a heads up, it's in the title, it's in the description, it's everywhere. We'll be covering spoilers in the book. So if you've not read it and you don't want that, then come back and watch the replay sometime. But if you are into learning more about this book, just getting some opinions, tonight we're going to cover those topics and go ahead and introduce our guests here tonight. We have Gray. Gray is with us. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
And of course, the star of the show, Lord Callous. Thanks for joining.
Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that.
And ReeferMan Reviews, he's going to join us here in just a moment, and we'll get him on as well. So I do want to just introduce to everybody, if you've not followed them, Lord Callous is, of course, Lord Callous TV. You should follow him on Twitter and YouTube. Fantastic content from a lore perspective, often brought into the Den of Nerds as a subject matter expert. So great to have you. And Gray, of course, very active in the Discord community and most recently in the D&D community with our good friend Polyhedral Paradise, Jason over there. And she's a star over there as well. So thanks, Gray. And ReeferMan, he's another active member of the Den of Nerds community, and we have met through that community, and he has his own channel that he started as well. So, and he's an avid reader, and we'll get his take on this as well. Hey, look who's here! Polyhedral Paradise, speak of the devil. Thanks for joining us, Jason. Good to have you here. And so, everybody, we're just going to go ahead and jump in. Again, there'll be plenty of spoilers tonight if you've not read it. And I've got some pictures up here that we can share as we go along, just because one of the complaints I think we all share is that there's a lot of characters, a lot of new stuff, and tracking it all is kind of difficult. But before we get too far in, just start and say, hey, Great. Overall, what's your take on the book, just as a whole?
I really enjoyed the book. Thoroughly enjoyed the book.
Good. Lord Callous, I've seen your review. You have a YouTube video on it. Go ahead and give us your take as well.
Yeah, I just thought that it was for an introduction to this new era. I didn't think that it was as strong as it could have been.
Yeah, I agree with all of your, like, if you haven't watched his video review, it's really good. I agree with everything he said, straight up. For me, the book feels like it was over ambitious as a coming out the gate. We're coming at you with everything all at once. Now, there's a plus side to that in that it's a lot, like right now. Yeah. And so it doesn't like dip you in, it dives you straight into the deep end and you got to just pick up and go. But that's also for me, the hard part about it and what made it difficult, because we were just thrown in, whether you know how to swim or not.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning right before we came on that I'm on my third read of it. And it's taken me this time to start really coalescing, right? Putting everything together and figuring out, oh, okay, I get it. These people, and I can remember them and I know what's going on. But I'm not sure that when you're introducing a new line, that it should take 3 times through to get up to speed. Right? Yeah. It's just a lot. So that's my complaint as well. Overall, I gave it a grade of a B+, and I only did that because it starts off with a bang. There's a great big event. We'll talk about that in full detail, but then it ends really strong. A lot of action. There's a big conflict, and it kind of ends on a cliffhanger that introduces you on. You're ready to go read the next book. So that to me gave it the most as far as just like what grade I would end up with. Otherwise, I would have had it marked down a little more. So that's my take. I was hoping that, and I know we'll get ReeferMan in here in just a moment. So let's open it. So in the first act, the book is broken into 3 parts. The first part is the big event, right? And let me just share. I've got some pictures up here. Let me share this picture. Here's the example. Here are all the Jedi introduced in this High Republic era. That's a lot of people. Not all of them are in this novel, but a good number of them are. And it's really tough when you're looking at this many people to take in. On the flip side, my logo's coming right over Lorna D's head. But anyway, on the Nihil side, there's not that many, and we only have pictures of a couple. But here's what I wanted to show. So it opens up with this big transport vehicle, the Legacy Run, and this vehicle can have compartments attached on. So like this vehicle over here on the right is an extension. It's just an add-on, and when it's not part of the ship itself. And then you can add many compartments. You see a bunch of them, these look like containers that you see like on a shipping crate, right? Like in ocean. So you see a lot of these containers, but these are all separate vehicles. And of course, you would have others on the other side. There's some along the bottom here. You can see these crates. So it's got lots and lots of things attached to it. And they're going through hyperspace, and they encounter something crossing the path. And I didn't catch it till the third time around. Third time around, they're looking out, and they see this reddish haze with hyperspace lane before they saw the vehicle. And then at the end, they see where this vehicle's going by, and it's got this red glow coming from its engines. So you get that clue. This thing's transversing the hyperspace lane. So if they're going north and south, if you want to just picture it in your head, if they're going north and south, this thing's going east and west, and it's crossing through kind of slowly. And as they go through, the captain of the ship veers around it, but then it breaks apart. And as it breaks apart, then all havoc breaks loose. And this, I think, this is where one of the biggest complaints comes from. Not only do you have a lot of characters to figure out who are, but the next is these pieces, as they come out of hyperspace, are traveling near light speed. And from a continuity perspective, a lore perspective, what are your views on those pieces coming out at that velocity? Does it create any problem for you? Or are you okay with it? What do you think, Gray?
I didn't quite understand why they came out at such a high velocity when you can drop out of hyperspace not at a high velocity. So honestly, I didn't catch why that was the case.
Yeah. Callous, what do you think?
Yeah, that part didn't bother me as much as, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but as much as towards the third act when they were sort of skipping, and it kind of felt more like they were teleporting, but they were still listing it as or considering it hyperspace jumps. So for me, that was more lore breaking than were these pieces coming out, because I kind of just accepted the pieces coming out as just with the story. It was, like it just kind of felt like it was okay that it was still just going at that velocity. But with the jumping or the skipping, that just felt to me like teleportation. And that I just didn't understand why they did that.
Yeah, I think both. I think you raise a really good point. We'll get there as well. Like you said, it's in the third act, and we're just now covering the first. So one of one of my good friends and a friend of the channel, Imagic Maker from Reimagining Star Wars, and we talked about this a week or so ago. And for him, the issue is if parts coming out of hyperspace come out at near light speed and they become high speed projectiles, much like and they even describe it in the book like a shotgun.
Yeah.
Right. Like you got all these pellets coming out in a blast radius. Then how come that's not weaponized and used like all the time? When people are in hyperspace, why wouldn't they just like throw out big pieces of shrapnel and have them blast out through wherever they're going?
Yeah, because the ships stop almost instantaneously. I mean, they come out and it's just boop, they stop. You know, or at least they appear to. You know what I mean? But,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do see that there is an XR Coon. The Phantom didn't come out at near light speed. No, a lot of ships don't. Now, one thing that I thought was really good is they talk about how ships traveling together can link their navicomputers so that when they come out of hyperspace, they don't run into one another. Right? They know where they're coming out, and they plot that so that they don't. Because not always are they stationary, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll drop out and they're moving right along.
Yeah.
Not near hyperspace or not near light speed necessarily, but they're moving right along. They're good clip. Other times they come out and they're, like I said, like a dead stop. And to me, in my head, I thought, well, if you don't have a navicomputer controlling how you came out of hyperspace, maybe you would carry that speed with you. But then Imagic Maker raised a really good point. Then why wouldn't you weaponize that? Why wouldn't you be kicking stuff out all the time? And if you think in the Clone Wars season 7, the Martez sisters, they end up kicking out that
spice.
Yeah, they kick out the spice in a big container, right?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't that become a projectile eventually when it drops out of hyperspace?
According to that book, it would.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a fair criticism. In the only thing I can say at this point is, and again, I'm going to jump ahead, but Kevin Tarr, right? He comes up with a way of predicting where things are going to come out. And they're able to get there and intercede before they become projectiles, right? They come out, they're able to stop them, harness them, whatever. And my guess is, while it takes a ton of processing power and computing power at that time, by the time we get to, say, the prequel era, that computing power has become much more stable and compressed. So things that used to take an entire, like we know that in our own computing space, right? The supercomputer used to take up a whole floor of a building, giant thing. And now like this thing has that much power.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm guessing that each system, each inhabited system would have very high processing power to anticipate anything that was going to come out. And they'd be tracking these things more precisely and have more interdiction in place to catch these things as they come out, because it would be a regular occurrence. And that would keep this kind of event from happening again in the future, for sure. And it is a major point of concern, even brought up in the context of this book, right? They're constantly saying, could this happen again? Was this accident or was it on purpose? And could somebody weaponize it? And if they're asking the question in the book, certainly it's reasonable for us, if you've read other novels, you've been following Star Wars for a time, to ask the same question, like, why isn't this weaponized in the future?
It's another holdover maneuver.
Yeah. So it's just them, or their way of letting us know, hey, we understand that you're going to have these questions, and we'll answer them in subsequent issues or subsequent novels. So maybe.
right, maybe.
You know, man.
Exactly. And it also, just so people understand, like, we learned that the reason this thing's crossing the hyperspace lane is it's using another technology, right? It's not using the typical hyperspace drive, or it's using a thing they call a path engine. And the path engines are described in the book as green glowing engines that are attached to a vehicle, right? So these are different than a hyperspace.
And that's what's equipped on all the Nihil ships.
Yeah.
Path engines.
Exactly.
Now, was the technology for the path engines developed by the Santekas?
Yeah. Well,
was that how they were saying that?
By the Santekas. It was out of the one lady that travels with the Nihil.
Yeah.
Well, then why wouldn't other people use it? If it was invented by the Santekas, they would still be using path engines, but only the Nihil use path engines. So it seems like Marchion Ro's father created the path engines.
Based on his,
the Santeka lady's predictions, yes.
Yeah, I agree. And there's some reason, again, like this goes the same way as the last one. Like there's some reason they quit using path engines. We don't know why. At this point, it's a big question mark. Well, I can guess why, because it happens at the end. Again, we're going to get a jump way ahead, but the central computer that runs the path engines is held in one place, and then each of the vehicles that have a path engine on them are controlled by the one central location. So think of them as terminals, right? So each of these path engines are terminals to the one system that's plotting these courses. And when you use a path engine, you're giving control of your vehicle over to whoever has control of the path engines.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that they're not intending to use them anymore, though, because to me, it's like I said in the review, with the introduction of the Santekas and the role that they play in this novel, and then you have also the Santeka, you have Lars that actually brings Luke and Kylo to the High Republic outpost in the Kylo Ren comic, right? So they're all, just from what I see, they're just tying it all together to the sequel trilogy, to possibly beyond that. So I don't know that they're necessarily going to stay away from the path engines. They just may be introducing it to us now so that they can reintroduce us to it later down the road. You know what I mean?
Well, can they reuse the paths, or do they each one have to be created by the Santeka woman? Because when she dies, there's no more paths. That would, unless they can reuse the paths, then the path engines wouldn't be usable anymore. They'd be void.
I think they're storing those path engines and they're selling them. That's one of the method of profit for the Nihil is selling these paths to certain people. Okay. But again, I'm not sure how you would use a path without a path engine.
Yeah.
It's all that's unclear to me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unclear.
Yeah, it's book one. Yeah, that's what we have to say. This is just book one, right?
right. And I think, Lord Callous, your overall assessment of the book as a whole is why I agree with it so much. While I enjoyed the story, I think it was over ambitious. Again, that's my term, right? I feel like the book was over ambitious, and it could have built to this event happening when we understand more context of what on earth's going on, rather than having to read it 3 times to figure it out, or read, a half dozen books and then come back to it and go, oh, okay, now I understand what was going on, right?
Yeah.
I feel they could have generalized some of the Jedi and just kept a couple stories of some sets of Jedi, and then just referred to the other 30 in the story as the Jedi, and then put them into some other books to build up their characters.
Exactly. Exactly. I completely and wholeheartedly agree with you. To me, it's just it seems so again over ambitious. Right? I guess that's the only word I can use for it.
It was tough trying to. It's, okay, who was that? Which one was that?
Right.
It was tough.
It was. It was. And
it makes it hard to connect to the characters when you're not immediately able to know who's who. And by the time you figure it out, their stories jump to another story, and you're like, well, oh, okay.
Except for Avar. Avar was the only one that was consistent, and she was consistent across all three stories. So that's the one that I remembered, It's like, okay, Avar. Let me cling to Avar. Where's Avar going? Where's Avar?
Right. And it's so bad that even at the end, she's out there with what's the guy's name? And this is the part of the problem. Elzar Man.
Man.
Right? Avar and Elzar are traveling together for the most part. But at the end, at the very epilogue scene, I was like, Elzar, wait a second. Let me think about that. Who was that? Yeah. And he was one, he was repeated in the book, but like you, I kind of clung on to Avar because at least I could remember her name. And then there were a couple others like I could remember Burriega.
And Skier. I love Fandom.
Right? You can remember those because Burriega is the
Wookiee,
and Skier is our lizard guy, right? Right.
And it's funny also because they released both novels and then also the comic. And I was reading the comic and the novel at the same time, and so I just wish they would have said, okay, read the novel first, then read the comic, and then read the young adult novel.
I would have liked that order too because I skipped it as well.
Yeah. I was like, well, what is going on? What are they talking about here? And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's what you're saying.
Yeah. And that young adult or the 8 to 12-year-old the novel to me was almost better.
Yeah, because you can follow it.
Yeah, right. Because you've got 2 Jedi, 2 non-Jedi, four characters primarily that you're tracking through. You get really familiar with them. You understand what's going on. Yeah, it's for younger kids. There are some issues with that book as a whole. I like YA
books personally. But this one, great writing. I don't want to knock the writing. Great story. I don't want to knock the story, but it's so convoluted.
Yeah. XR Coop said the ships are dope. Let me show you guys if you haven't followed. Some of these ships are great.
I love how the Vector's controlled by their lightsabers.
I thought that was really, really smart.
Actually. Yeah, it was a cool twist. Yeah, something that we hadn't seen.
Yeah. I wish they had continued that on, like in the other Jedi ships. But for those, if you haven't read, these Jedi Vectors, they take their lightsaber. They're interchangeable vehicles. They're all exactly the same. You just take your lightsaber, you put it in. That's what powers the weapons or unlocks the weapons. You can't use the weapons, and they have no real computer assistance. So they're extremely difficult to fly and navigate if you don't have Jedi-like reflexes. So if there's someone who were to steal one of these things and try to fly it, that would be tough.
Yeah.
Okay. ReeferMan said he's having some internet connections, having a blizzard.
We are too.
He's in the comments. We've got a decent snow here in Central Ohio as well.
Yeah. I'm in New York, and it's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's almost moving on to 2 feet almost.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I went out to get a UPS package and didn't make it back. I had to walk. So I drove the vehicle out. We got an all-wheel drive, and I couldn't get it back up. That I live on a bit of a hill, and I couldn't get back up the hill. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. The other vehicle that they talk about a lot of these long beams, and that's this is a artist rendition of the long beam. They're pretty cool. And you can see some influence on both of these vehicles for what we see later, right? This reminds me, yeah.
I like the vector. It reminds me a lot of the arc.
Yeah.
The clones fly.
Right. And, yeah. And you can almost see an X-Wing influence.
Yeah.
But, and this here reminds me a little bit of the Naboo fighter with these engines on the side, like this part right here. But they're silver and, more honed. The Tempest Runner, these are the Nihil ships. They're pretty cool, pretty beefy, right? I'm like, wow, that's pretty awesome. And then
something out of Eve Online or something like that.
And then here's a storm ship. So just from a vehicles perspective, I wanted to share those with everybody since it was brought up. All right, so that raises another point. So before we go to part 2, we learned that the Nihil are organized using weather type patterns, right? So they have this rule of 3, which I wasn't a fan of.
Mm-mm.
Like, we have a rule of 2.
Exactly.
Why do you have a rule of 3? Now wait.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't like that at all.
I didn't like it. And every time they referred to the clouds, I was like, you could have just chose any other storm name except cloud to make them sound serious.
Yeah.
Like storms and strikes. I mean, it could have been lightning or hail, but cloud. It just really nullified the intensity of the Nile, in my opinion.
I'm wondering if Charles Soule was like going through one of the hurricanes or something while he was writing, because he's got load and storm breaker. Like, wait. So you have the rule of 3. You have 3 tempests, right? So that's the rule of 3. There are 3 tempests. That's the highest level underneath the eye, which is but he's got that one big eye on his helmet.
And each tempest has 1,000 or more troops.
Right. So you have 3 tempests. Those are, and again, let me just bring them up so if people aren't familiar. I keep hitting the wrong button here, but let me bring them up just so you guys can see. Come up here. March on Row is the guy with the big eye, right? So he's the head. He's the top of the Nile.
He's the eye of the storm.
The eye of the storm. Very good. And then they've got the 3 tempests. Lorna D. That's our Twi'lek here. Pan Eta. Pan Eta is described as, and we were talking about this before. If you remember from The Force Awakens, when Finn wanted to leave at Maz Kanata's castle, and Finn wants to leave, and they say, well, go talk to these folks over here. They're getting ready to go. Pan Eta is the species, that big guy with the 2 big horns coming out of his chin. That's the same species that Pan Eta is. And then Kassav Miliko, he's the 3rd Tempest. And he is of our favorite, he's the same species as our favorite pirate, right? And again,
Weequay.
Yeah, Weequay. So most of us know him from everything, from the Clone Wars animated series through the Rebels animated series, and even down at Galaxy's Edge. So you've got what's his name?
Hondo.
Hondo Anaka.
Hondo Anaka.
Yeah. So Kassav Miliko is the same species as Hondo. So anybody, and so those the organization of the Nihil are based around that. So they have these 3 tempests. Under the tempests, you have storms. Under the storms, you have clouds, and under the clouds, you have strikes. So they are organized in that way. So you would start off life as a strike, move up to be a cloud. It's sort of like a military alignment. So you got
And then
sergeants.
Marcion Rowe, he's not like the leader of all of them. He just provides them with the paths and takes a third of their money. He actually doesn't have clout. Like, he's not a leader.
Well, he might take issue with that, but he also, doesn't really. He's the eye, right? He's the seeing eye, and that's what he does. ReeferMan. Lorna D sounds like a gal from the 50s. Sounds like Grease. But anyway, what was her name? Sandra D. Right, it was Sandra's.
Yeah, from Grease.
Sister, Lorna. So anyhow, so that's really the first chapter, or the first part of the book, right? Anything else before we go on to the second part? Anything?
Well, the one thing, and I kind of tweeted out about that too, that bothered me was the term space wizards, because oh my goodness, that drives me crazy.
Why?
It just drives me crazy because it's not, it doesn't fit in universe. I dig it on Earth as an earthly jest, but in universe they would not refer to Jedi as space wizards, because we make that differentiation because space is so woo for us, right? And so we created the wizards and sorcerers on Earth, but then the Jedi are space wizards. It wouldn't be the same in universe. That just drives me crazy. But anyway, go.
Right. There are certain things I think through the book that will set off triggers for different people.
Yeah, because I was stuck for about 5 minutes, just like, why did he just say that?
I actually liked it because it was on The Mandalorian, you know, and so I was like, oh.
That bothers me.
Fair enough. And they talk about their lightsabers as
laser swords. Yeah, and I get it. I know that George said that, but it's just an earthly jest to me that doesn't fit in universe.
Right.
That's all.
Right. It's bringing some of our vernacular in.
Fair enough.
To be fair, I guess Timothy Zahn complained because in one of his original novels, he used hot chocolate, and he got ripped apart for it. So it's happened from the beginning. When people are writing these novels, they
referred into one of the Thrawn novels. They referred to the bathroom as a bathroom and not a refresher for the first time in the entirety of the Star Wars universe. I was like, you just ruined it, dude.
Right. So
Take it back.
It's fair. I think it's a fair criticism, right? Like to say you're bringing in vernacular that we use when we're talking about Star Wars into Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it can be off-putting to folks, right? So fair enough. And it does stick out when you're reading it. You're like, oh. And like I agree with Gray as well. Like I chuckled a little bit. Space wizard, right? But I totally get the other reaction as well. ReeferMan, is paths maybe some form of force power? He said he might be able to join us in about 5 minutes. Okay. He laughed for about 5 minutes. Yeah. So I don't know if paths are a force power. It's a good question. We just don't know. I think that's the answer.
But is she connecting somehow, or are they, the Santekas, somehow connecting with the Force?
Well, they said that she was the only one who ever in all of like history could do that. She's the only person. Like, so there's no other Santekas. It's not like somebody can birth another Santeka that's going to do it. She was the only one. Something happened to her.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, part two, the second act of this novel was the part that drugged the most. I felt like my feet were in mud, right?
The battle of the Jedi chasing the Nile who took the farmer, I did struggle. It went on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he does a great job building, but sometimes it just gets redundant. He is so descriptive that it takes away from some of the plot points that he could be making, the time that he could be spending developing the story. He's building the world, and or individual characters, and then mistaking that for like actual development. Like I don't need you to completely describe, you know, the color of this person's hair from their scalp all the way to the top, you know, the end of their hair. Just tell me that, and then give me a little bit more about what makes this character tick. So I think he was a little bit too descriptive when it came to
That's a good point, Lord Callous, because I was just rereading, like I mentioned, I'm on my third time through, and Lorna D, when she's introduced, she's Twi'lek, and he goes into describing her Leku.
Yeah.
Like they're emaciated, and he goes into the color and how they turn into like almost bony white towards the end. Like it's really descriptive, and it's like that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. He just goes into a ton of detail about Lorna's Leku.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Didn't change anything for me, but now I can completely picture her without leaving anything to my imagination. But I got you.
I don't mind if they're super descriptive with people that you're going to just follow constantly throughout the whole book. But if it's just somebody who's only going to be in for a small part, you can really just start generalizing here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And ReeferMan, part 2 was interesting but slow. It was. So I just started reading part 2 for the third time through today, and this is where they're trying to figure out what's going on. So you're back at Coruscant. You've got the Chancellor, Lena So. Chancellor is trying to figure out what's going on. They're controlling the hyperspace lanes. They're trying to prevent more death, but at the same time, people are being squeezed because their way of living is being hampered. And again, we go into this detail on Coruscant of this one mountain. And he goes in to talk about the vegetation on the mountain, the texture of the mountain, the color of where people are touching the mountain, but, you know, on and on and on about this mountain. It's like, okay, there's a mountain.
Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah. And so, it took me the first time through, like I read through the first act probably in 2 nights, just like about 45 minutes each time. And I was through it. The second act took me like a week. It was just like, come on, push. And if people are bogged down, I know like Josh Lucas did in Nerds, he got bogged down in act 1. Good luck, dude.
Yeah, that's the problem, because they should have edited that for pacing because of that. If you're somebody who once it slows down, you just put it down and you never come back to it, then that's a shame, because that's going to happen with this book. If you put it down because it gets slow, then you won't get into the third act. And there was some goodness that happened in the third act, you know, that made me look forward to the next one. So
I agree.
And there's some good stuff in the second act, because they start telling the stories of the Santeca and Marcian's dad, and how, you know, we got the path engines, and they got into a lot of detail about some things that I liked, but then, you know, then they drug on some major parts.
Yeah, and we really, there's one of the major characters is Kevin Tarr. Keven, Kevin. He's just a human. He's a nerd. He's a numbers guy, data guy. So he would be your systems administrator to your company, right? That's the kind of guy that he is. And Kevin is about crunching numbers and pulling data out and data analysis. And he really is one of the central figures of the whole book. And he's not a Jedi. He's not a bad guy. He's a number cruncher guy. And if that's indicative of, if you're coming to the book for action and adventure, and the whole second act is about Kevin, it's not just about Kevin, but it revolves around Kevin coming up with these answers with little bits of action packed in, because there is a scene where they're trying to get the black box right off of the ship that tore apart.
The Legacy Run.
Right, the Legacy Run. And they're trying to get that black box, and there's this rush for it. Once Kevin figures out where it might show up, there's like these 3 locations, and they show up, and there it is. And then you get you get the bad guys, the good guys, everybody gathered together at this one place, and they have a great big battle for it. But that is that in the third act? I think that's in the third.
Yeah, that is the third act. You mean
yeah, because the second act they're trying to get to there to figure out where it's going to come out. But the
that's the setup, right? That's the setup
for
that we end up. It ends up paying off in the third act. That we
really does.
Okay,
yeah. One part about the second act is how one of the Tempests, Kravitz, what's his name? The big one that we were just talking about.
Kassav Milico.
Kassav, he went to like Iriadu and some other places and tried to sell
that was awesome.
Information to where the emergencies would come out to save people. And he broke off, and he's doing this on his own. And the people of Iriada, which is Moff Tarkin's family, or his planet, they're all like warriors, and they are pissed.
I loved that little little caveat because I was.
And that's what made you get through the second act, because you're like, oh my gosh, what are they gonna do?
Well, yeah, and these are warrior people. You're right, and I want to know more about them.
Yeah.
What happened to him? Where are they?
But the fact that that was Tarkin, like Gray said, the fact that that's where Tarkin was from, that was I just dialed right into that.
That's why Tarkin's so brutal.
Yeah.
And then they show up at the end and just like, anyway, it just.
Yeah, they're having none of it, right? There's no surrender at that point.
Yeah.
They're done, and really they were messing with we can kind of get there. Kevin, in the whole second act, they're trying to figure out what caused this event and how they can predict it. Kevin comes up with this idea where if they get tens of thousands or even like 100,000 droids that can link together and put their processing power together, they can take the data that he's collected, process it, and come up with predictive paths of where these, I shouldn't have used paths, right? Predictive exit points for the Tempest runner leftover pieces, where they're going to
the
emergencies. Yeah, that's what they call them.
They call them emergencies. So they can predict where these emergencies are going to be. In the meantime, the Nihil, they've got this Santeca lady, and she can just figure it out in her head.
So the Santeca lady is over 100 years old, and she's being kept alive by Bacta and machines, kind of like Palpatine in the Rise of Skywalker. And she's long past her years, and she's a frail, emaciated woman who basically just does computing all day for the path engines.
Right.
And she was Santeca, and she was kidnapped when she was younger.
That's right. And they've had her for like you said, almost 100 years.
Marchion's dad kidnapped her.
Yeah.
And I thought that was some of the better storytelling too, because at first I really didn't dig Marchion so much, because the Nihil, to me, they didn't seem as menacing, as they just weren't. They just didn't replace the Sith for me, as far as, And so when you started getting into the psyche of Marchion, when they introduced sort of his relationship to her, and you saw how sort of psychopath he was like, I was like, oh, okay, maybe there is something here. Maybe there is something here, and it's not the Nihil, it is just Martian. He's the one that's a problem.
Well, there's something up with him. He has it out. You don't know what species he is. He has it out for the Jedi. He has that weird rod. All he wanted was lightsabers.
And he's psycho.
And he was talking about frying that old lady when she wanted to take a nap. You know, so I was like,
yeah, he is the only thing that ended up saving the Nile for me, because otherwise they were just like the pirates from the Rebels. You know, they were just, you know, they just weren't menacing to me.
Well, that
raises chaotic.
That raises another point that I meant to bring up at the beginning. Sort of the thing that instigates the Nile from the get-go is this great big Jedi station that they're building out in the middle of the outer rim. And
Starlight Beacon.
The Starlight Beacon. Because the Nile have been out there just doing their pirate thing. Like just pirate stuff.
Yeah.
General nuisances. And then the Jedi the Republic, the High Republic, they decide to put this Starlight Beacon, the Jedi outpost out there, and they're like, wait a second. Now you're coming out to our space. You're messing with our whole way of life, our profit, our everything. We don't like it. And then that kind of instigates them to turn up the heat. And there's where things start to go off the rails. And so in the second act, Kevin is trying to figure out where they're going to come up. This Santeca lady, she figures it out, and the Nihil start going to where these emergencies are coming. And the first guy is this Kassav, right? He shows up in the system where Tarkin's relatives are from. Right? He shows up, and they know there are going to be 3 emergencies there. And he says, "Hey, you pay me, we'll take care of these emergencies." And they're like, "Bah, go away." And boom, one comes out, blows something up, people die. Like a lot of people die. Not 10, like 10 million, right? Like die.
Yeah.
And he says, "Okay, there's coming another one. You got about a minute to figure it out." And they're not having it. And again, an emergency comes out. The third one comes out, or it's getting ready to come out, and he says, "It's bigger than the first one. You pay me now, and we'll take care of it, or suffer the consequences." Well, they pay him, and he doesn't make it.
Yeah.
And that thing blasts into the planet, kills or moon, and it kills millions of people. Just devastating. He takes the money and runs. He's like, "Oops, sorry, skip."
Yeah, because his intention was initially to take the 50 million credits and then leave the Nile. He was going to go off on his own and just, you know, take his Tempest and start a new life someplace else. And now he realized afterwards, oh my goodness, because what was her rank? What was the leader from Iran?
Yeah, I can't remember her rank.
Yeah, she basically told him, kind of like the Taken, we have a certain set of skills. You know, that's kind of how I felt. Like when she had him so shook, because she was like, "We are about our business. You've got the money, but we are going to find you. Like no matter where you go, we will find you."
And we will kill you.
Yeah.
And all the people on Iriadu are all like a strong warrior. And that planet, the whole planet just wants to kill you. So if you survive the planet, you're a strong human.
Yeah, it's like the Mandalorians, right? Is what I thought, like the warrior culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's great.
They ain't messing around. And right. So that event happens. Then that leads us to the third act, because Kevin does figure out how to anticipate where another one's going to come out.
A handful of them.
Yeah, there's like 3 of them, right? And they want to get this black box, and it's a race to get the black box. And again, this is where you get Marshawn's true deviance, because he sends one of his Tempests, Kassav, out there, and Kassav goes out to get this thing. Now Kassav already got himself in trouble, or it was Lorna, right? It was Kassav. Yeah.
Well, he did send Lorna, right?
Lorna got in trouble too, but he did it on purpose to make her look bad.
Yeah.
So that,
yeah, and we never really followed Panetta at all.
He didn't. Panetta, he just allowed for him to sit and relax. He sent out Lorna because he needed her to suffer a failure.
Yep.
And then he set up Kassav. Exactly.
Yeah. So Kassav goes out there. He takes his whole fleet. He's going to get this. He has one mission: get the recorder. And so he goes out there. Well, the Republic, Kevin says, hey, this is where they're going to be. Well, the Republic says, we're sending everybody. We're putting all our chips in. They send the Jedi. They send their forces. And then they also send these warrior people.
Yeah,
well, they came on their own. They just showed up.
Right. They said, here's where we're going first. Show up if you want. And they said, oh, we're on. And they showed up. And so, yeah, Kassav's out there and he's thinking, I already got money. Maybe I'll just skedaddle. And then the fleet shows up. And here's where I think we talked about at the beginning. They start using these path engines as a way of doing battle.
Just blinking in and out of small spaces.
Yeah.
So they can just leave from behind you and then be in front of you.
Yeah.
Well, think of it like these micro jumps, but even more micro. Mm-hmm. Right? So like in the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker, they were doing these little micro jumps, right? With the Falcon. And they're bipping up in and out of hyperspace. And they're skipping through, right? They call it skipping. And think of it like that, but much smaller. It's like as little as 100 meters. They could just blip them out and blip them back in. And what they would do is when they started losing the fight and they realized they were outgunned, then Marchand Rowe uses the engines against Kassav's will. Right, they take control of all Kassav's ships with these path engines. Kassav figures it out. He's like, "Oh no, shut off the path engine because this dude's taking control of all the ships." But he's blipping them in and out like in the middle of another ship. So everything that you know from hyperspace travel, where you wouldn't be able to do that, and then, again, it kind of sets up the Holdo maneuver again. Like they're blipping in and out of other ships.
Yeah.
It's a way of using micro jumps into other vehicles.
Yeah.
With devastating results. Yeah, kamikaze. That's exactly what they're doing. But it's being controlled by Marchand Rowe. He's doing them on these micro hops into other vehicles and just blowing them up.
But he's got something nobody knows about it, but he hates Kassav and he's setting them up.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. And that's where you figure out how devious it is. Because he just, the whole Tempest, right? They got this rule of 3. He got 3 Tempests, and each one of them have thousands of warriors, right? He takes one whole Tempest and just sacrifices him. Says, I need to teach these folks a lesson. I'm in charge, right? Like, I know you said, Gray, like he's not, but.
Well, he wanted to teach Kassav a lesson and lose all of his people because he believes that Kassav killed his father. So that was his ultimate reason for it.
Yeah, I think he was always bent on revenge. He was just trying to figure out how best, to pursue it, and he was able to do that.
And I don't feel that he started out as a leader, but by the end of the book, he has set himself up to be the leader of the Nile. But when it started, he wasn't.
Yeah.
He was just the guy who took their money and gave them the pads so that they could do what they do to make them money.
Yeah, that's a good point, Greg, because one of the main core values of the Nile was freedom. Right? Mm-hmm. They were free to do whatever they wanted. And they just had this profit sharing deal, right? So we give some of our money to the Nile as a group, everybody profits. So when one person eats, we all eat. Mm-hmm. is their kind of saying, right? So it was a way for them all to benefit from one another and be free. So you're right. Like Marchand wasn't calling the bets. Their Tempests were doing their own thing, and the people aligned with them were doing what sort of like their family houses, right? If you go back to Game of Thrones kind of analogy.
Yeah.
They had their family houses they belonged to, and this was the red wedding.
And he ultimately, he wants to. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But and that's just the third act to me is all action, like and twists and turns and.
Well, and then he tells you at the end that all of this was done, the whole legacy run and all that by Marchion Road just to get a Jedi. So what is the future of this?
Yeah, and that's the biggest question is what did the Jedi do to him?
In the third act, Marchion Road kidnaps Great Storm.
Yes. Yeah. So
and a family, and ultimately that's what he wants. We don't know why. He has something against Jedi and he needs a lightsaber.
Yeah, you raise a good point. We should back up just a little bit because you're introduced to this dude. Let me share my screen again, and we'll go on. So our big Jedi. Let's find him in the mix here. Loden Greatstorm. He's the green guy back here, right? So Loden and his Padawan, which he should be nearby. Where is he? Bell, right here at the bottom. So these two diagonal. So Loden and Bell are sort of on this side path, and they're trying to save a family that has been kidnapped. We later learned that Lorna sets up Loden. She doesn't even care about the kidnapping. She's trying to capture Loden. That's her whole mission in life. But you don't know it until the very end.
Because Martian set that up.
Yeah,
he was the one that actually made the call when they attacked. Yeah, and what I loved about that act, or in that act, actually it was even from the very beginning,
right,
with Bell, was the fact that they kept trying, or they made such an emphasis on the fact that he was having to learn as a Padawan to fall from great distances, and they sort of reiterated that, you know what I mean, like throughout the whole time.
So, him off the mountains.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, are they doing this so that they can reintroduce Mace Windu at some point? Because this will let us understand that Mace, because I'm one that believes that Mace survived that fall. I believe that. And so go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish yours.
No, I was just going to say, so with them harping on that so much, it makes it just that much more believable for us that, yes, he did, in fact, survive that fall. Because, I mean, we've seen it in the Clone Wars. You see Mace and Obi-Wan fall from a great distance. I mean, it's not something that it would be foreign to us, but with them actually
jumps out of ships.
Yeah,
it just without parachutes multiple times.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're right. At the very beginning, Loden is trying to train. He's trying to teach. He's mentoring Bell, and they show up in their ship and they hover, and Loden just he jumps out, and then they're going to the surface to help this group. Loden just jumps out. Bell follows. He jumps out, and then Bell loses control, and he's gonna splat into the ground. He's like, "Nope, I'm dead." and Loden catches him. And Gray, you mentioned before too. So Loden says, "Well, we'll practice again. We'll go to Coruscant, and we'll yeet you off the top of a tower, and then you'll have a couple of minutes to think about it before you hit the ground. You'll figure it out." It's like, okay. But then they do get to a mountain, and Loden yeets him off that mountain, right?
But he has somebody down at the bottom to save him when he couldn't save himself.
Right. It's hilarious. And Bell's learning. You see how different people struggle with different concepts. Like for Bell, it was difficult to figure out this landing thing. Other people might be different.
Well, I like what Lord Callous just pointed out is that, it's setting up for maybe what makes Windu, and then there's these forced jumps, And then, like, in the Clone Wars, Ahsoka grabbed that ship, and then, like, Rey grabbed that ship. And so I feel like they're trying to, like, put in things to explain things that are coming up.
You're right. You're right. That's another good point, Greg, because I do think they are setting up some things we've seen in the sequels, and Lord Callous mentioned it earlier too. But I want to follow this story along. So you get this sub story with Loden and Bell, where they're chasing after this family that's been kidnapped. In the end, then Loden is actually kidnapped, and he's taken captive. And Lorna captures him, takes him back to Marchand, and Marchand takes his lightsaber and imprisons him. And I thought it was interesting how they imprison a Jedi, right? There was this concept of if there's pain, then you won't be able to focus.
So he just has a bunch of people tortured around him 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, if he acts out of way in any way, they'll torture more. And it breaks his ability to concentrate and to be as effective. And he mentions that that his ancestors had dealt with the Jedi before.
Because it just struck me as his intention to sort of drive him to darkness. Mm-hmm. I mean, because you could sort of see the anger beginning to fester within Loden, and I mean, he ultimately calms himself, but I just thought that just diving into Martian's psychosis or whatever's going on with him, and the way that he was sort of torturing those innocents, if you will, to bring out the darkness within Loden. Like, what is it? What did the Jedi do that is making him do this? Like that.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, it's like something that they did ruined his life.
Yeah.
And I'm also dying to know what that purple rod thing is.
Yeah, he's got this purple rod that has some sort of power in it. We don't know. Yeah. And then there's at the end, he takes off his mask. And it's for the first time people lay their eyes on him and they realize it was ... Oh, that's not important.
Yeah.
Oh man, you just did that. That was wrong. That was wrong. And so they do set up. That's why I mentioned, like, they really do set up where the story might go from here. We don't know much about Pan. Eventually, you would assume he's going to be brought in more. There's a whole issue with Lorna and Marchand. Who is Marchand? Apparently,
he's my favorite character. I really liked Marchand Rowe. I thought Mark Thompson brought his voice and everything to life. It was wonderful. I definitely am interested to see the future of that character specifically.
Yeah, I agree.
He was the Nihil for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this epilogue scene where Avar and Elzar are on that beacon, the Jedi beacon, and Elzar gets a Force vision.
Oh, they're on Naboo when he gets that Force vision, aren't they?
No.
He's getting sent to the beacon, and they're on Naboo, and they're saying goodbye to each other because they won't be around each other a lot anymore. I might have misunderstood that.
I thought they started on the beacon and then left. Maybe I'm bugging now.
No, I thought they were on the beacon as well, like in a big terrarium area.
Okay, I wrote down they were on Naboo. That's the only reason I said that.
I could be wrong. I mean, I'll get there again. Like again.
No, you're fine. Go ahead. It's not
Well, I think it helps reinforce again the point we made at the very beginning. Like, this book is really ambitious, right? I keep saying it is over ambitious because I'm on my third read through. Now I can't really wait a second. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. Right. But I do know that Elzar has this premonition, right? This Force vision. It causes him to get a bloody nose, and he sees massive amounts of death, massive amounts of death.
Insane.
Jedi being just murdered. You don't know. And it was more than just a premonition. It was like a certainty.
Yeah.
It was it was like the Force visions that you've seen in like the Star Wars galaxy in multiple areas. And then it ended.
And then it ended. Right. And so I thought, well, we've got a lot of open threads that now we're vested in. Marchand, who is he? What's he, what's his end game? What is that purple rod? Why is he so mad at the Jedi? What's going on? Like, what's his whole motivation? Right? The dude is mentally touched.
Yeah, he is touched.
I feel like Charles Soule was like, okay, you guys, you want something to break down, something to look at, you want more characters? Here we go. There's all these characters. Now you guys can think about this forever.
Yeah. It was crazy.
It was crazy. Just a lot to take in. And like I said, I think once we've read a half dozen books or whatever, all of these characters will be much more familiar with. And it'll be like Skier. Skier's regrowing an arm, by the way.
Yeah.
But they've already well, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. But if you've seen any of the images for the comics coming up, then I'm kind of like, why would you release that? Why would you release that? Let it be a surprise. I'm just hoping I'm wrong, but they released, I mean, it's not like it was, I didn't go searching for it, but they released a couple of images for the new comics that are spoilery.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Don't look for it then.
I won't.
Don't do. Stay off of StarWars.com.
I'm typing in Google. But there is the young reader book, that 8 to 12-year-old, and I thought they did a nice job of carrying in some of these character references, like Skier. Skier shows up again.
Yeah,
and he's regrowing his arm, and it's from here. So like, there's connective tissue going on between the books. It's actually pretty entertaining, right? Yeah,
and he's Skier and Avar are in all three, right? And like I said, I started with The Light of the Jedi, but because the comic is such a quick, easy read, I shifted and I finished the comic and then I went back. But in the comics, Skier is, it's him and his Jedi Knight, Padawan, if you will, that's becoming a Jedi Knight. So I had no context as to why he didn't have the arm. So I'm, right? I'm like, why? What happened to him? And I figured that they would answer it in the book, and then they answer it in the book, and then you see him again in Justina Ireland's book. Yeah, at the end.
I hope that the Nihil aren't the main enemy going forward, and that whatever Marchion is doing, and Marchion has some crazy thing planned moving forward, because I found him and everything about him way more interesting. And so I really hope that that's what they move forward with, because if they just choose the Nihil as the bad guy, I don't know if I'm going to have the gumshoe to keep going.
I think that that's absolutely right, and that was why I was happy with their decision to make him the way that they did, and then introduce treat the way that they treated Loden at the end, because we have the Acolyte coming.
Yeah.
At the end of, so I don't, like you said, I don't think the Nihil are going to be the big baddies. I think this is just going to transition us into whether the Acolyte is a dark Jedi or whether it's a Sith or whatever Force being or Force user the Acolyte is. I think that's where it's gonna move to.
That's really good. And my cause, they're going to lead to the return of Abeloth.
Yeah. Really? Abeloth?
Well, I mean, there's just some speculation. Some people really want to see that. They want to see more Legends material brought into canon.
Oh, no, she's a great bad guy, I have to say. She's so, like, OP. It seems I don't know.
Yeah.
Easy.
But she would be more she would be more towards the sequel trilogy time period than she would be for them.
Right.
Right.
She would come. She would come after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting what they're going to do with that era. But I do think they're setting up these books to be really connective, and I agree with both of you. I think that Marshawn Rowe is our big bad for sure. He is the big bad, and he's going to develop to be even more. I think.
Yeah, I think he made the book. I think this book is about Marchion Rowe and going forward. I think, like how Anakin is the main story of all the others. I think he's just a real good. He wrote him very well.
Well, I think of Senator Palpatine, right? When he was just a senator. Had you watched him in order, right? He's just a senator. You don't know that he's emperor. Right, yeah. And you don't know that he ends up being Darth Sidious necessarily, right? In the Phantom Menace, I think they're setting up Marchion to be, or Marchion, however.
Kind of like how they did Palpatine, and he ends up converting into the big bad.
I think so. I think he may be pulling strings behind the scenes a lot more because he did that already, right?
Yeah. So why would he want? Why would he want a Jedi and the saber? I bet you he wants to control one of those ships to do something, or maybe they have. I don't know, but.
Yeah, I don't know either.
and I mean, just something as simple as him igniting the lightsaber and not being fearful of it, whereas Lorna was scared. Like she didn't want anything to do with it, and he just naturally turned it on and was playing with it.
And then hacked that dude up.
Chop that dude right in half.
Yeah. So,
like
there's something going on there.
Yeah, he's a mental. I'm really curious to find out more about him. And that's why I said that's why I rated the book higher. Is how it ended. Like for all the flaws that I felt that the book had, where it drug and there were some issues, it ends on a high. And if you're gonna, if you make it through the book, you want to see what comes next. So that raised the score for me overall. Yeah.
I listened to the aftermath, like all three at once. I didn't listen to one and then wait for the next one to come out and then wait for the next one. And if I did that, I might not have enjoyed them as much. So I'm really going at this more open-minded, like you are going to have to wait as these come out, so don't try to judge them so harshly because the other ones that you love, you got to binge it.
Good. Fair enough.
And I think, like you guys were saying earlier, just the fact that they're sort of everything is intersected. So even though we do have to wait for the next one, I mean, Claudia's is coming out this week, right?
Yeah, February. We're February 1st already.
Yeah, so hers is coming out this week, and we're going to get another comic this week as well. And then so we don't have to wait months for the next. One to come out. So they're filling in those gaps, and they keep your mouths fed with.
So let me raise just another point of controversy that I hear out there. And sure. I personally didn't pick up on it, but did you pick up on any of the SJW or any kind of social agenda, any kind of feminist whatever? Did you?
I did not like at all.
No, I didn't feel that there was any agenda in. I think that they did well to connect or try to connect certain aspects. Like this book, Avar, to me, sort of reminded me of Satil Shan or a Bastila Shan. She had battle meditation just as they have battle meditation, and I enjoyed that. Then when you go into Justina's book, A Test of Courage, they reference the Sith Wars. So there was a lot of that I didn't feel like it was agenda driven. I just felt like they just
if you think about
on the Jedi.
Yeah, like Loden Greatstorm, he's a manly man.
I think it all goes to the diversity on the whiteboard, and I just think that's the multitude of aliens.
I agree. I felt like men were represented as men, women as women. Like I didn't feel like they were downgrading men to elevate women. I didn't feel like there was any kind of political messaging in there about Orange Man bad or anything like that.
No, I didn't feel that at all.
I didn't pick up on anything like that. And in the main character through that act 2 was Kevin Tarr. He's a human male. He ends up being a bit of a hero of the whole book, and he's just a smart guy. Like I mentioned,
I think the
strong, powerful Jedi.
The biggest complaint I've been hearing has been about Yoda. But I don't see how that's founded, because he was barely in it. He was barely a mention in this, and he was barely a mention in the comic. So I don't see that one. And then the fact that Avar is going to become the big to-do for this series, which to me I don't have a problem with, because like I said, to me she reminds me of Bastila, or she reminds me of Satele, and they were both the Grand Masters. You know what I mean? It just didn't resonate that way with me.
Yeah, it didn't. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. I didn't see any of it. If anything, I saw more of it in that other book.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go off the rails.
I haven't got to that one yet.
Okay.
Off
the rails. There's an
Test of courage.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Test of courage.
Yeah.
A Test of courage. There's an argument to be made.
Yeah.
Again, if that's the thing that you lead with, if you're really sensitive to that kind of thing, it's there for sure. I think in a Test of courage. To me, the book doesn't read as an SJW novel. But if you're looking for it, you can find it. In here, I looked for it because
I didn't find it.
My antenna were up. I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, I didn't feel it.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to be fair there. I think we've kind of explored from beginning to end, right? We've given a ton of spoilers. Like if you haven't read the book, you know what happens.
I don't think in my recommendation for it is, if you are not really into the long books and stuff, that if you watch one of these, like a breakdown of it of some sort, that you actually don't need to read the book. But it's a good book to read. I'm not saying don't, but I'm just saying you don't actually have to, I don't think, if you just get the basics of it and you know what is going to happen at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of wish that it had built like a Test of Courage, right? Had we gotten a half dozen of those kind of novels first, where you get to know these two characters and these two characters and these two characters.
Right. And then when they generalize it all in the main book, you already have some sort of grasping of all these characters. But for somebody just coming into it, it's hard to recommend it, even though it's a really good book.
Yeah. Maybe they started a year before. Right, and where you've got these Jedi Masters and their Padawans, and you could have followed, Loden and Bell.
Yeah, the comics could have just been doing it all. I mean, you could have really just done it all with comics, and then.
Yeah, and then you would. That's a good point too, Gray. Had they started with comics, say a year before this event happens, then you'd have mental pictures of all the characters too.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I know what Loden looks like. I know what Bell looks like. I know what Avar looks like, or
but it's not a casual read. You can't just listen to it while you're doing all your stuff and know what's going on. You actually have to sit down, pay attention, listen to it more than once, and that's that's hard for some people to do.
Mike Porter, thanks again, Mike, for being here. One of the absolute anchors in this community, Mike Porter. We love you. Is absolutely right. They could have built it like they did in the MCU, or even like they are in The Mandalorian, right? You introduce a character, you let them develop, you get this connection to somebody, and then you do another, and then you start to have crossover events and tie-ins. Then you have, the big movie.
Yeah,
right? The big Avengers type movie.
Because this is essentially the expanded universe under the Disney Lucasfilm banner right now. That we're getting, and it's sort of like they're tossing all of those characters that we had in the expanded universe. Imagine if all of those characters were dumped on your doorstep with the first read. Like that is just overwhelming. It's overly ambitious, as she said. So that was just kind of my feel.
Gray, show us your job aid there as you were going through. This is
Oh,
great.
I sit and stare at this as I go.
Right?
I need to do that. Just like,
It's so
okay.
much easier. Right. You're like, oh, and I mentioned that one of the characters introduced is the same species as Babu Frick, right? And they end up saving this character, and the guy says, "Oh, look, it's a cute little baby," and the guy's like, "It's not a baby."
Oh, and one of the Nile was a Gungan.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Gungan, right?
And I also listened to it on the audiobook, and when he started talking, because at first they didn't say it was the Gungan, so when he started talking, I was like, "Wait a minute!" And then he said, "I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm actually a fan of the Gungans after Clone Wars and Rebels, and there's a Gungan in the Aftermath trilogy that talks normal. He doesn't actually have that Gungan slang that nobody likes.
Yeah.
And so they've really kind of built up on the world a little bit that I actually kind of enjoyed them as a Star Wars. I stand alone. I know.
No, they never struck me as unnecessary like they do some people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, they just happen to be another one of the characters. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And again, I think I've heard reviews of this book all over the place. I know Alex with Star Wars Explains that it's his favorite Star Wars book of all time,
says right? It's their favorite book.
And I'm like, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
It's not my work. It's not my least favorite by far.
No.
There are some novels out there that I just plain don't like.
I think people should listen to the story for sure, but I think you can piece it and just read the Wikipedia on it personally.
Yeah. Well, and here's my recommendation: is get yourself a Metropolitan Public Library card.
That's what I do. I have one, and I listen to all my stuff for free, by the way, on
Me too. Get yourself one of these cards. This is from the Columbus one because I live in Central Ohio. But get yourself one of these. They're free. And then get yourself the audio book app that ties to the public library system. Check the thing out and listen to it for free. That's you don't have to spend money to get this book. I agree with you, Gray, right? There's plenty of spaces. If you don't want to spend the money, you're just not that invested in the story yet, you can still listen to a pretty good Star Wars novel. And again, the audio books, the way that
they're beautiful.
Oh, yeah. They're great.
And Mark Thompson is
amazing.
He's a beast.
Yeah. And the soundtracks they put to them, everything, right? They're worth it. And they're especially worth it for free. So that's my recommendation on it. Listen to it on audiobook for free. You're not going to hurt yourself. And if you're just thirsting for more Star Wars content, go ahead and buy it. It's worth it. It's a good book. It's just
it is a good book. I feel bad for the way I sound like it's not a good book. I've enjoyed the book.
Yeah, I felt the same way. It's a good book. It's just not a great introduction to the High Republic.
Agreed.
That's just how it felt for me.
Agreed. I think we all have that exact same opinion. It's a good book. I wish it. I'm my one thing, over ambitious. That's it. That's all I keep saying it over and over again. I don't think it was the best introduction. And A Test of Courage was a much better introduction, but it's a 8 to 12-year-old reader, not an adult. And
I like the YA books personally. Lost Stars was a YA book, and I am a huge fan of that book.
I write young adults, so that's why.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, not professionally. It's just
I get along with the young adult books actually better because I don't feel like they're oh, look how smart I am, and let's see how much I can confuse you with my big words.
Or this problem right here.
Yeah. And so I like the YA because I feel like they're not trying to rub it in your face at what a talented writer. I mean, they're talented writers, but they're not stuffy about it, I don't think.
Right. I mean, look at how many characters and how many species. It's just wait, what species is this one again? And one of them back here, Ami. It's this blue dude back here, right?
The big.
You're like, oh, wait a minute, I know what that species is. I just like, but it's hard to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on. So, right. I think we're in agreement. Oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. So there we go. Anything else for the greater good? We'll just wrap it up here, I think.
No, but this has been fun visiting with you guys and running through this. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was
Great. This is great. So again, and let me bring this up again. We'll go back up here. Lord Callous TV. You should if you're not already, you should be subscribed on YouTube and get your notifications and on Twitter. I enjoy some of the Twitter interactions out there, and I appreciate the support you've given me, Lord Callous.
Absolutely.
Twice visiting my show. I really, really appreciate it. And the support you give me on Twitter and YouTube is just wonderful. You're a great human being. Thank you.
Well, so are you. And that's why I like I said, I need to hear your voice as well. I need to hear your voice. And
I love Gray. Gray is touched a special place in my heart because our childhoods very similar. And very few people that I feel like I connected to like I have with you. And I'm so thankful that we've met through this community. And this is a great example of what Star Wars can do.
Yes. And I very much enjoyed being around you for the first time, Lord Callous. And Fandom has been tons of fun.
It's great. Well, you guys, thank everybody for being here tonight. It's been wonderful. And really appreciate it. And if you haven't subbed to my channel, I would really appreciate this. I'm trying to grow my community as well, and anything that you would do to help me grow that would be wonderful. So if you're viewing here, you haven't subbed, give me a shot, and I appreciate it. And Gray, Lord Callous, once again, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Good night. Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye bye.